Have you ever loved someone so deeply that you gave them every part of you, only to realize they left when you needed them the most? Zaria Lennox had always believed in quiet love. Not the flashy kind, not the kind people paraded on social media with filters and staged kisses. She believed love was consistency, protection, presence, the kind that didn't need to announce itself, because it would always show up. But on the day her body went into labor, the only man who was supposed to be there didn't pick up the phone. Because he wasn't in the country. He wasn't in a meeting. He wasn't even alone. Cassian Leclerc, billionaire investor, son of European wealth and husband to a woman who never once asked him for his money, was waist-deep in ocean water with another woman. Laughing, sipping, gone. And the doctor had to make the call. A call that stripped away every illusion of loyalty Cassian had built for the world. Before the tabloids, before the betrayal, before the silence between them stretched too wide to cross, there was a handshake, a moment that started it all. This isn't the story of a billionaire who cheated. It's the story of a woman who chose dignity over noise, and a man who learned that fatherhood doesn't begin in photos, it begins in presence. Welcome back to Mr. Charles Stories, where we bring you powerful American stories, filled with heartbreak, healing, and the choices that define legacy. If you've ever stayed silent instead of exploding because your peace mattered more, this story is yours. Brighton General Hospital's neonatal intensive care unit always ran cool. Machines beeped softly. Lights stayed dimmed. Life, in its most fragile form, lived here. Zaria moved like she was born for it. Calm hands, steady eyes, voice like a lullaby. No matter how hard the shift, how tired the night, she spoke to babies like they were her own. That afternoon, she was wrapping up a chart note when one of the nurses tapped her shoulder. "You've got a guest, family?" she asked, confused. The nurse shrugged. No clue. Said he donated last year. Requested a walk through. Zaria raised an eyebrow. No press? None. No camera. Just him. She walked to the viewing window. The man stood alone. Tall. Grey sweater. Hands in his pockets. His eyes were fixed on the incubator closest to the glass. He wasn't moving like a donor, more like someone remembering something. She stepped into the hall. "Sir, you'll need to gown up if you want to enter." He turned. Zaria had seen his face before. Online, in headlines, Forbes lists, boardroom news. Cassian Leclerc. 40, under 40. Worth over $500 million. The kind of man who usually came with 5 assistants and a publicist, but this one didn't. He nodded. "Of course." She handed him the gown and gloves. "You've been here before." His voice was soft. "My brother died in that room, almost 30 years ago. I was 5. Zaria looked at him, really looked. He didn't have the aura of money in that moment. Just grief, aged and folded. They entered quietly. He said nothing. Only watched. She showed him around, explained how the ventilators worked, what the numbers on the monitor meant. He didn't say much, but he listened. After 20 minutes, he turned to her. "Thank you," he said. He reached out, not for a handshake, but gently to touch her arm. Not inappropriately, just a thank you. She gave him a small smile. "You're welcome." And that was supposed to be it. Zaria was sipping cold coffee during her 10-minute break behind the hospital. The wind had picked up, and she pulled her hoodie closer. Footsteps approached. Cassian, alone, again, this time, with 2 coffees. "I remembered what you ordered," he said, extending one. She hesitated, but took it. "You didn't have to come back," she said. "I know." She motioned toward the bench. "Sit, if you're staying." They sat in silence for a minute. He glanced at her. "You love what you do." "It's not about love," she said. "It's about being useful." He nodded. "That's rare." She looked at him sideways. "Why are you really here?" He paused. "Because the last time I came, I didn't feel like a number. You didn't ask what I was worth. I don't care what you're worth. That's why I'm here." She didn't respond. He pulled something from his pocket. A folded piece of paper. There's a fundraiser next Friday. No cameras. Just donors. Would you come? She blinked. As a guest? No, he said. As the only person I'll talk to. She stared at him. Why me? Cassian looked down at the cup in his hand. Because when I'm around you, I don't feel like someone's investment. She said no to the fundraiser, but she said yes to dinner. The Ethiopian place was small, family-owned. They shared a mess platter with no utensils. He used his hands awkwardly, laughed when he spilled sauce. I haven't done this since college, he said. Your hands look terrified, she teased. He grinned. My board would have a heart attack. They talked for 2 hours. No money, no stocks, no legacy talks. Just her stories about premature babies, his love for old paperbacks, her fear of flying, his allergy to strawberries. When he walked her to her car, he didn't touch her. He didn't even ask for another date. But as she drove off, she looked in the mirror. He was still standing there, watching her taillights fade. Back at her apartment that night, Zaria found a small envelope taped to her door. No logo, no branding. Inside, a note. If you ever get tired of walking alone, I'd be honored to walk beside you. Zaria read the note again the next morning before tossing it into her purse. She didn't reply. She didn't text. She went to work, scrubbed in for a 12-hour shift, and kept her head down. But on her way home, walking the same cracked sidewalk past the same corner bakery, something made her stop. The window had changed. There, inside, seated at the back with no phone in sight, was Cassian. Same grey sweater, same quiet gaze, a paperback in hand. He didn't look up. She stood at the glass for a second, unseen, then walked in. He noticed her halfway through the door. Didn't expect you, he said. I didn't plan to stop. Do you want coffee or silence? Silence. He nodded, pointed to the chair across from him. She sat, took off her coat, and for 20 minutes, they said nothing. But for the first time in a long time, Zaria didn't feel alone. It became a rhythm. Wednesday evenings after her shift, she'd stop by. Sometimes he'd be reading. Sometimes he'd already ordered her usual green tea with honey, not sugar. She never had to ask. He never touched her, never leaned in too close, never rushed. One night, she asked, "Aren't you used to women chasing you?" He blinked. "I'm used to being wanted. I'm not used to being known." She frowned. "What's the difference?" "Want is fast," he said. "Knowing takes time." Zaria let that sit. "So which one do you want?" He met her eyes. "You already know." 3 months in, he invited her to his townhouse in Tribeca. "I make decent lasagna," he said over coffee. "I've got a suspicious stomach," she warned. He grinned. "Then I'll make you toast instead." Zaria stood on his doorstep the following Friday, nervous but curious. There was no staff, no chef, no grand tour. He met her in jeans, barefoot, a dish towel slung over his shoulder. The dining table wasn't long or dramatic, just 2 plates. A bottle of orange-flavored sparkling water, and a folded napkin on hers. When she opened it, she saw her name, scribbled in handwriting that wasn't trying to impress, just trying to show up. They ate. He cleared the table. She stood at the sink while he washed dishes. Zaria looked around the kitchen. No gold faucets, no chandelier. Just a man with wet sleeves, scrubbing burnt cheese off a tray, humming a song she couldn't place. When he turned around, his cheek had sauce on it. She handed him a paper towel. He took it and smiled. "I like you here," he said simply. She didn't say it back, but she didn't leave either. It didn't happen the way it usually does. No candles, no music, no pretense. She had fallen asleep on his couch. He'd covered her with a blanket, then laid down behind her, fully clothed, arms careful not to wrap around her without permission. But when she stirred in the night and backed into his chest, he didn't move. His breath stayed even. His hands stayed still. It was the first time in years she had fallen asleep without waking in a panic. When she opened her eyes the next morning, He was still there, awake, watching the ceiling. "Do you always wake up before 6?" she asked. "I didn't sleep." "Why?" He looked at her. "Because I didn't want to miss a second of this." They didn't post each other. He didn't take her to red carpets. She didn't ask to meet his board. They read books side by side. He walked her home in the snow. She met him for lunch on her 30-minute break, and they ate from paper containers sitting in his car. He asked questions, not about her favorite color, but about her father's absence, her mother's migraines, why she always tied her shoes twice before leaving the house. She noticed the little things too. He never talked over waiters. He apologized when he was wrong. He never let his phone buzz twice during dinner. Zaria began to realize he wasn't trying to impress her. He was trying to be a safe place, and that, more than anything else, made her want to stay. 6 months into their quiet rhythm, Zaria woke up on a Saturday to a knock on her door. No bouquet. Just a courier holding a sealed envelope and a box of groceries. "For you," he said, "from Cassian." Inside the envelope was a simple letter. "I don't want a wedding with guests who barely know me. I want mornings where your hair is messy and my breath smells like sleep and we're too honest to pretend we're perfect. I don't want someone to match my net worth. I want someone to match my silence. Will you be mine? Not as a partner in the eyes of the world, but in the eyes of the ordinary. Cassian." At the bottom of the page was a small square box tied with cotton twine. Inside, a slim silver band. No diamonds, no flash. She wore it for a week before she even told her sister. They didn't have a bridal party, no designer gown, no venue sponsorship. 12 people stood on a rooftop in the West Village. He wore navy. She wore cream. Her hair was natural. His hands shook slightly. When they kissed, the photographer didn't even click fast enough to catch it. It didn't matter, because Zaria had found what she never thought she would. Not a billionaire, but a man who didn't ask to lead, only to walk beside her. But every story has a middle, and sometimes the quietest beginnings lead to the loudest disappointments. Because in 2 years she would give birth, and he wouldn't be there. The house in Connecticut wasn't flashy. Cassian didn't buy it for the view or the square footage. He bought it for the silence, for the long driveway lined with trees, for the second-floor sunroom where Zaria said she could read on rainy afternoons. It had no grand gates, no imported stone, just warmth, a backyard with actual grass, a small herb garden Zaria started with basil and thyme. She moved in slowly, not with boxes, but with touches. Stacked books in the corners, a navy, blanket draped across the couch, a photo of her mother in the kitchen. It wasn't curated. It was lived in. That's how she liked it. She continued working 3 days a week at the hospital. Cassian offered to build her a clinic. She declined. "I want to keep waking up for something that has nothing to do with you," she said gently. He respected it, never pushed. Their first year of marriage was quiet, safe. She'd come home to fresh coffee in the evening. He'd wait for her shifts to end and rub her feet while she watched cooking shows. They took turns cooking dinner, sometimes burning it and laughing anyway. Once, she found a stack of grocery store receipts in his briefcase. When she asked why he kept them, he said, "I like remembering how normal we are." He meant it. There were nights they stayed up talking until 2 a.m. about nothing, about childhood, about fear, about what their parents did right, and what they hoped to do differently if they ever had children. Zaria had been in love before, but this was different. This didn't steal her attention. It steadied it. This wasn't sparks. It was firewood. No one saw them out at galas. No tabloids cared where they went, and Cassian didn't mind, not then. He'd made his fortune already. He didn't need the noise, but the noise came anyway. It started small. A photo of them at a corner diner, posted by a stranger. "Is that Leclerc with?" Then came the headlines. "Billionaire Cassian Leclerc's new bride." A local nurse? From NICU to net worth, who is Zaria Lennox? Power couple or publicity cover? Zaria didn't read the comments, but Cassian did. She noticed when he stopped smiling during breakfast, when his emails got longer, when his phone started buzzing more. He started staying in the city on certain nights. "We had a late board dinner," he'd say. She'd nod, trusting, tired. But trust, even in strong marriages, wears down quietly when it's not cared for. She only asked him once, in passing, "Do they treat you differently now?" He shrugged. "They're adjusting." She knew what that meant. They didn't like her. She wasn't the woman they pictured beside him on annual reports. Not wealthy enough, not sculpted enough, not pedigreed. Just a woman who used public transport and packed her own snacks. And Cassian, he said it didn't matter. But over time, Zaria saw something change in his eyes. The way he looked at her didn't dim, but the way he looked at her in public grew careful. They went to a private charity dinner once, and he introduced her as Z, not my wife, not Zaria, just Z. She said nothing that night, but she remembered. That was the night she stopped wearing the silver band to his business events. Not out of spite, out of self-preservation. The next morning he noticed, "You didn't wear your ring last night." "I forgot," she said flatly. He didn't believe her, but he didn't push either. They made eggs and toast, talked about replacing the car tires, and went back to their corners. Marriage, even the best ones, have weather. Sometimes the forecast changes without warning, and in theirs, clouds had started to gather, not because of shouting, not because of scandal, but because Cassian had started caring what the world thought again. And Zaria? She still only cared about what happened behind closed doors. Their values were beginning to drift, not in big storms, but in slow tides. And she felt it. One night, she found an invitation in the mail, embossed, elegant, an exclusive Tech Wealth weekend hosted in Lake Tahoe. His name was printed in bold. Hers? Nowhere on the envelope. She held it out to him after dinner. "This wasn't addressed to both of us." He blinked. "It's mostly just board guys and advisors. No partners this time." She nodded. He waited for her to say something else. She didn't. He turned back to his wine, and she turned off the kitchen light. Silence. Again. But this silence felt colder than usual. And Zaria? She was starting to count how often she was the only one noticing. She didn't cry. She didn't confront. She paid attention. And when a woman learns to pay attention, the truth becomes hard to ignore, especially when the person she married starts talking more to mirrors than to her. By the end of that week, Cassian started coming home later. He blamed meetings. She blamed herself, for a moment. Then she stopped, because her intuition had never lied to her before, and it wasn't about to start now. Zaria sat across from him at dinner, staring at a plate of risotto she hadn't touched. Cassian was talking about something, some merger, some shift in one of his funds, but his voice sounded far away. She stirred the food with her fork, not because she was hungry, but because silence felt too loud now. "Zaria?" She looked up. "You good?" She nodded. "Yeah." "Long shift. You should cut back," he said. "You don't need to keep working." "I know," she said. "But I want to." He looked disappointed, but said nothing. They ate the rest of the meal in silence. Afterward, she stood at the sink rinsing plates while he scrolled on his phone. He hadn't touched her in 2 weeks. Not a hug, not a kiss, not even a hand on her lower back in passing. The kind of touch you don't notice is missing until it's been missing long enough to hurt. That night, as they got ready for bed, he reached for her waist like he used to. She stepped away gently. "I'm not mad," she whispered. "I'm just not sure you see me anymore." He paused, then turned out the light. The next morning, she caught him smiling at a text on his phone. He didn't notice her watching, and she didn't ask. She just walked past him, kissed his cheek, and went to work. That night, he didn't come home. 3 days passed, then 4. He said he was in DC for a conference. She didn't believe him. Not because of evidence, not because of proof, because the silence between his words had changed. And women like Zaria don't need receipts to recognize distance. They feel it first. long before it shows up in reality. He came back late on the 5th day, new cologne, new tension in his jaw. He kissed her forehead, said he was tired. She let him rest, and made a mental note of the unfamiliar scent. One evening, Zaria got a call from an old friend who worked events. "You didn't tell me you were in Milan," the friend joked. "I'm not," Zaria said. "Well, your husband was—" Her friend texted a photo. Cassian at an art exhibit, standing beside a stunning woman in a black dress, hand lightly placed on her back, her head tilted toward him. Not obvious, not scandalous, but intimate. Too intimate for a married man whose wife didn't know he left the country. Zaria stared at the photo for a long time, then quietly deleted it, and cooked herself dinner. She didn't ask him about it that night, didn't throw the phone in his face or demand an explanation. Instead, she said something softer. "I think I'm ready." He looked up from his tablet. "For what?" "To have a baby." Cassian blinked. The tablet lowered. "Now?" Zaria nodded. "I don't want to wait anymore." He forced a smile. "We'll manage," he said. That was all. No celebration, no long hug, no breathless joy. Just 2 words, said more like a chore than a choice. That was the night she slept in the guest room, and when he didn't follow her, she didn't return. She found the lipstick on his shirt 2 months later, a soft coral color she never wore. It was faint, smudged near the collar. She stared at it in the laundry room, standing still for nearly 10 minutes. When he walked in, she held it up. "What's this?" He glanced at it, shrugged. "Probably yours. I don't wear this shade." "Then maybe it's your mother's. She hasn't been here in a month." "Zaria, are we really doing this? You know you've been acting pregnant." He blinked. "I didn't say that." "No, but you meant it." "Have you ever caught someone in a lie so obvious, so insulting, you didn't even have to raise your voice? If you've ever kept your dignity when someone tried to play with your peace, hit that like button and comment below. You're stronger than silence." Zaria didn't argue. She handed him the shirt. He dropped it in the hamper and left the room. No apologies, no guilt, just distance. The kind that grows in small inches until it becomes a chasm. She started keeping her keys in her purse, started setting alarms only for herself. She moved quietly, stopped checking if he was coming home, stopped waiting for updates. She was protecting her peace, not her marriage. By the time she hit 7 months pregnant, Cassian's schedule had changed again. Now he had a conference in Bermuda. 2 days, he promised. She asked him if he was sure. He gave her that familiar smirk. "The baby's not due for another 3 weeks." She nodded, packed his travel pillow, and let him go. The day he left, she stood at the front door watching the car pull away. She didn't cry. She didn't call her sister. She just turned and walked upstairs, slowly, one hand on her belly, the other on the railing. She didn't know it then, but it would be the last time Cassian would see her pregnant, because that baby was coming early. And when the time came, Cassian wouldn't be anywhere near the delivery room. The storm started at 2:38 a.m., not outside, inside her body. Zaria jolted upright in bed, hand gripping her belly. A rush of warmth soaked through the sheets. She blinked, then exhaled, slow and steady. Her water had broken. The baby was coming. She slid out of bed, steadying herself on the edge of the nightstand. Her hospital bag was already packed, standing by the closet like a quiet soldier. She had prepped everything weeks in advance. Intuition whispered that this baby wouldn't wait for a full-term deadline. She dialed one number first, her mother, not her husband. Her mother picked up on the second ring. "Mama, it's time." 15 minutes later, headlights swept into the driveway. Zaria eased herself into the front seat of her mother's sedan, breathing through the contractions. They were close, closer than expected. "Should we call him?" her mother asked gently, glancing at her through the rearview mirror as she sped through the still dark roads. Zaria didn't answer right away. Cassian had left for Bermuda, or so he said. She hadn't tracked the location. She didn't ask for his itinerary. The last thing he texted her was, "Signal may be weak. Talk when I land." That had been 12 hours ago. She finally said, he wouldn't get here in time anyway. Her mother's silence was the only answer. They arrived at Brighton General a little after 3:15 a.m. The nurses recognized her. The billionaire's wife? One whispered behind a clipboard. Zaria nodded silently, wincing through another contraction. The nurse smiled. "We'll take great care of you." "Is your husband on the way?" Zaria forced a breath. No, they didn't press. Within 20 minutes, the fetal heart monitor began to beep erratically. The baby was in distress. One of the nurses, an older woman with gentle hands, touched Zaria's shoulder. "You've got strength in your eyes. We're going to take care of you both, all right?" Zaria nodded. She was wheeled into the operating room. Emergency C-section. There was no time for pep talks. No time for calm walks up and down the hallway with a partner at her side. No warm hand to grip. No kisses to the forehead. No whispered encouragement. There was just bright light, sterile air, a silent prayer, and then a cry. Sharp, small, strong. A boy. Her son. Tiny fists balled up near his chest. His face scrunched into a scowl like he didn't appreciate being dragged into the world uninvited. Zaria couldn't hold him right away, but she smiled through tears. She had done it. Alone. She was still groggy in the recovery room when she whispered, "Call him." The doctor paused. She opened her eyes. "Call his father." "Doctor." Halloran nodded. He didn't wait for the publicist. He didn't route it through Cassian's assistant. He opened the hospital file and called the emergency contact number. It rang 3 times. Click. A groggy voice answered. "This is Leclerc." "Mr. Leclerc," the doctor began, his tone measured. "This is Dr. Halloran from Brighton General. I'm calling about your wife." A pause. "What happened?" "She went into early labor. We performed an emergency C-section. Your son was born at 4:22 a.m. Another pause. Longer this time. I thought she wasn't due yet." "She wasn't. But the baby's stable. Zaria's recovering well. She asked that we inform you." Silence again. Then, "Is she okay?" "She's resting." The line went quiet. Too quiet. No waves. No party music. No background sounds. Just one long, empty breath. Then, "Thank you." Click. Zaria dozed in and out of sleep. She woke again to the sound of soft voices and the click of a NICU door. But it wasn't her mother, and it wasn't a nurse. Cassian stood at the window. His coat was still on, his hair uncombed, eyes bloodshot, not from sleep, but from a kind of internal panic that even power couldn't fix. He stared through the glass at the newborn wrapped in soft blue, blinking in slow motion. His son, his blood, his mistake. He hadn't spoken to Dahlia, hadn't told her where he was going. He had booked the jet through his private assistant and didn't look back. The jet lifted off from the private strip at 6:12 a.m. He didn't sleep during the flight. He didn't drink. He didn't eat. He stared out the window, both hands clasped in front of his face like a man kneeling in church. By the time the wheels touched down in Boston, the sun was rising. Cassian drove straight to the hospital. No calls, no delays. He didn't stop at home, didn't change his clothes. He walked through the hospital halls like a man chasing time. In the NICU, he watched as his son blinked slowly and yawned, stretching, one tiny arm upward like he was reaching for something unseen. Cassian placed his hand on the glass. The baby's hand curled in reflex. He didn't cry, not this time. He just watched his son, and then quietly, unexpectedly, he wept. The kind of weeping that doesn't come from guilt, the kind that comes from a deep realization. He'd already missed something he'd never get back. The sound of the 4 machine beeped softly in the dimmed room. Sunlight crept through the blinds, drawing pale lines across the hospital floor. Zaria stirred beneath the thin blanket, her body heavy, sore, stitched and silent. Her mother sat near the window, thumbing through a Bible she carried everywhere. When Zaria opened her eyes, her voice was faint. "Is he okay?" Her mother stood, smoothing her daughter's hair gently. "He's beautiful. He's in the NICU, strong lungs, strong heartbeat." Zaria blinked slowly. "Did you call him?" Before her mother could answer, the door opened. Cassian stepped inside. Zaria's eyes narrowed. Her pulse didn't spike. Her breath didn't catch. The hurt had settled too deeply for that. He was wearing the same clothes he wore the morning he left. His face was pale. The skin under his eyes bruised by exhaustion or shame. Maybe both. Her mother gave him a long, unreadable look, then stepped out quietly, closing the door behind her. Cassian walked to the foot of the bed and stopped. She didn't sit up, didn't speak. He took a breath, searching for words. "I flew back the moment I got the call." She didn't blink. He tried again. "I didn't know you missed his birth," she said softly, her voice steady. "That's what I'll remember." Cassian swallowed hard. "I thought we had more time." "You were in another country, Cassian, with another woman." His face cracked. She looked away from him, focusing on a scratch on the bed rail. "You told me Bermuda," she continued, her voice controlled. "You told me 2 days. You told me not to worry. And you smiled like everything was fine. I was wrong. You were selfish." He stepped closer. "I'm here now." She turned her head sharply toward him. "Now." Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "Do you know what it feels like to push a child out of your body surrounded by strangers, wondering if the father even remembers your due date?" He looked at the floor. "I do." He moved toward her slowly, sitting in the chair beside the bed. "I want to make it right. You can't undo absence. I want to be a father." Zaria studied his face. "Good. Be one. But I also want—" "Stop." She cut him off. He froze. "You don't get to talk about what you want right now." Silence. She exhaled. "He has your eyes," she whispered. "But I pray he never learns how to disappear when things get inconvenient." Cassian's eyes glassed over. He reached for her hand on the sheet. She moved it away without hesitation. That small rejection hit harder than shouting ever could. "I'm not angry," she said. "I'm clear." He opened his mouth, but she held up a finger. "I'm going to heal, Cassian, but I'm not healing for you." His shoulders sagged. A knock came at the door. A nurse stepped in. "Dr. Lennox, they're ready for the birth certificate. Would you like me to bring it in?" Zaria nodded. The nurse returned moments later with the form. Zaria took the pen. She filled out her son's name. First, middle, then paused at the father section. She glanced at Cassian. "You want to sign it?" He nodded slowly. "Yes." She handed him the pen. He signed. When he handed the clipboard back, she reached for the nurse call button. "Can you remove him from my visitor list after he leaves?" The nurse hesitated. "Of course." Cassian's eyes widened slightly. "Zaria, you'll get visitation," she said. "You'll see him, but not me." She didn't answer. She just looked at the door. He stood slowly, backed away. Before he left, he stopped at the doorframe and whispered, "I'm sorry." She didn't look up. The door clicked shut behind him. 2 days later, she was discharged. He offered her the house. She declined. He offered the driver. She declined. He offered a live-in nurse, postpartum help, security. She declined it all. Her mother picked her up in the same sedan she arrived in. The baby was swaddled, sleeping peacefully against her chest as the wind carried autumn leaves across the hospital lot. Cassian watched them from a distance. He didn't follow. He didn't ask for a photo. He just stood at the far end of the sidewalk as the car turned the corner and disappeared. When he returned to his apartment, his phone was lit with headlines. "Billionaire's wife gives birth alone while he's in paradise with mystery woman." "Investor Cassian Leclerc under fire for leaving wife during emergency labor." "Fatherhood fail? Leclerc misses birth." Twice, 2 board members withdrew from a pending deal. His PR team was scrambling. His lawyer texted, "Damage control needs to start now." He turned off the phone, then turned off the lights, and sat in the dark. Because what he'd lost wasn't image. It was access to the only two people who had ever seen him fully. Zaria had always given quietly, and when she left the same way, with grace, with silence, and with a strength no wealth could ever replace. The apartment Zaria moved into wasn't large. It was a second-floor walk-up with creaky floors, outdated cabinets, and a view of a laundromat across the street. But it was hers. Her mother stayed with her for the first month, helping with night feedings, meal prepping, and folding tiny clothes with warm hands and quiet wisdom. They didn't talk much about Cassian. There was no need. Peace had finally returned. Even if it came with midnight crying and sore wrists from bottle rotations, Zaria didn't cry at night. Not even once. She had cried enough during the pregnancy, in silence, while smiling. Through dinners alone and folding baby clothes without a witness. Now she focused on her son. She named him Elian. It wasn't a trendy name. It wasn't family tradition. It meant God has answered, because deep down, that's what she believed. That despite everything, she had been protected. Elian was healthy, curious, quiet like her. He didn't fuss unless he was hungry. He always seemed to be watching, soaking in his new world with those deep-set eyes that looked so much like his father's it sometimes stopped her breath. One morning, she was warming a bottle when her mother stepped into the kitchen. "There's a car outside," she said. "Same one from last week." Zaria kept her back turned. "He's not knocking." "No," her mother said gently. "Just waiting." Zaria didn't move. She didn't go to the window, didn't open the door. Letting someone back in starts small. It starts with curiosity, a glance, a word, a moment of softness. Zaria wasn't ready for that. She wasn't sure she ever would be. Cassian had been showing up every Thursday. He never rang the bell, never brought gifts, never asked for photos. He just sat in the black SUV parked across the street watching the window, sometimes for 10 minutes, sometimes for an hour. Then he left. Each visit was a confession, a silent one. Each moment he spent outside instead of barging in was a way of saying, "I know I don't deserve to be inside yet." He had told his assistant to cancel all Friday meetings indefinitely. Thursdays were for Elian. Even if Elian didn't see him, even if Zaria didn't look out. 2 months after Elian's birth, she returned to work at the NICU part-time. She didn't tell Cassian. She left Elian with her mother 3 days a week, walked to the hospital, and clocked in like nothing had ever changed. The nurses welcomed her back with cautious hugs and extra coffee. Some of them had seen the headlines. None of them asked. Her scrubs felt the same. The monitors still beeped the same rhythms. The babies still reached for fingers and held on too tight. Here, she still mattered. She was still Zaria. Not the wife who got left, not the one in the articles, just the nurse with the steady hands and the calm voice. One Friday, she came home from a long shift and saw a man sitting on the apartment steps. It wasn't Cassian. It was his assistant, Noel, mid-30s, polite, always cautious. He stood up quickly. "Hi, Dr. Lennox," he said. She raised an eyebrow. "I'm not here to cause trouble," he said. "Cassian asked me to bring these." He handed her a thin folder and a small insulated bag. "What is this?" "A trust. And milk." She frowned. "Elian has a cow's milk sensitivity, yes? He had a reaction to regular formula last month." Her expression shifted slightly. Noel continued. "Cassian worked with a nutritionist. It's a hypoallergenic blend. He also set up a medical trust, just in case Elian ever needs anything. No strings, no PR, just a backup." Zaria didn't take the bag right away. She looked him in the eye. "He sent you?" Noel nodded. "He didn't want to come to the door. He thought you might think it was pressure." She took the folder, not the milk. "I'll consider it," she said. That's all he hoped for. He stepped back and walked away without turning around. That night, after Elian was asleep, Zaria opened the folder. Inside, a single sheet. No branding. Just a signed statement that Elian's full medical expenses, educational costs and future emergencies were already covered. No expiration, no monthly limits. And at the bottom, a handwritten note. I wasn't there when you needed me, but I will never be absent again. Not from him. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't groveling. It was simple, sincere. Zaria closed the folder and stared at her son sleeping beside her. Then she looked at her hands, still steady, still strong, and still completely her own. The first time she let him hold Elian, she didn't say a word. It was a rainy Thursday afternoon. Her mother had an appointment. Zaria had the day off. Cassian had shown up like clockwork, parked across the street, same black SUV, engine off, hands on the wheel. Zaria opened the door and stood at the threshold. No expression, no greeting. He stepped out of the car slowly, unsure if he should speak. She moved aside, didn't invite, didn't smile, just didn't close the door. He followed her up the stairs, quiet as ever. Inside, the apartment smelled like chamomile and warm bottles. A lullaby played faintly from her phone speaker. Elian was in a bassinet by the window, wrapped in a pale yellow blanket, eyes flickering beneath closed lids. Zaria stood beside the bassinet and motioned. You can hold him. Cassian approached like he was stepping into holy ground. She handed him the baby without hesitation but didn't leave the room. Elian stirred in his arms, gave a soft grunt, then relaxed. Cassian held him like glass, too gentle, too careful, like he still didn't believe he was allowed. Zaria watched, arms folded. I know you've been coming, she said flatly. I didn't want to disrupt you. You were waiting for permission. I was waiting to deserve it. She said nothing. Elian let out a soft sigh in his father's arms. Cassian looked down at his son and blinked fast. He has your nose, he said. Zaria walked to the kitchen. I'll make tea. He didn't follow her. He stayed rooted in place, afraid even his breathing would wake the child or disrupt the moment. They didn't talk much that visit. He stayed for 20 minutes. Didn't ask questions, didn't try to explain. When Zaria handed him a mug of tea, he held it with one hand, balancing the baby with the other, awkward but determined. Before he left, he placed Elian gently back in the bassinet, adjusted the blanket, and whispered, I'll see you next week. Zaria didn't walk him out, but she didn't close the door behind him immediately either. And that alone was progress. The weeks that followed created a pattern. He came every Thursday at 4. She let him in at 4:03. He held Elian, read a board book, stayed an hour, and left. No drama, no pressure, no discussions about what had happened. He never once asked for more than what she offered. Zaria watched, not because she wanted him back, but because she was testing his consistency, and he passed. One afternoon, he showed up with a photo book, black linen cover, no title. Inside, photos of Elian taken from a quiet distance. Candid, honest. A shot of Zaria walking him in a stroller past the pharmacy. Another of Elian reaching for her necklace as she adjusted his hat. None of them staged. All of them respectful. He placed it on the counter. I hired a discreet photographer. No faces, no press. I didn't want to forget. Zaria flipped through the book slowly. The final page had a handwritten note. Thank you for protecting his peace, even when I didn't protect yours. She didn't say anything, but she placed the book on the living room shelf instead of returning it. Elian started to recognize him. At first, it was subtle, following Cassian's voice with his eyes. Then came the giggles, the reaching arms, the excited kicks when he heard the door click. Zaria watched it unfold without interfering. She didn't want to stand between a father and his son. But she also wasn't going to forget the choices that made her a single parent in the first place. One Thursday, as she wiped down the kitchen counter, she asked quietly, Do you regret it? Cassian looked up from the floor where he'd been stacking blocks with Elian. Regret what? Missing the birth, the lies. Dahlia. He paused, then nodded once. Every minute. She leaned against the fridge. Why didn't you pick me? Why wasn't I enough? You were, he said. I just wasn't strong enough to fight what people expected of me. She nodded. You cared more about looking powerful than being present. I cared more about being respected than being loved. And now, I want my son to respect me for the man I became, not the man I was. Zaria didn't cry, didn't soften, but for the first time since everything broke, she listened, and that, for someone like her, meant something. The next visit, she let him feed Eliane. The one after that, she let him take Ilian for a 20-minute walk around the block. By the 6th visit, she handed him a spare key and said, "Only for Thursdays. No surprises." He nodded, pocketing it like it was a relic. That night, she watched through the window as he buckled Elian into the stroller, adjusted the strap twice, then walked slowly down the sidewalk like the world had finally slowed down to match the rhythm he once abandoned. And for the first time in a long time, Zaria smiled. Not because things were fixed, but because effort was louder than apologies. And this time, he was staying in the frame. Zaria returned from work one afternoon to find a box sitting just inside the apartment. Small, plain, no logo. Her mother was folding laundry on the couch. It came about an hour ago. Courier said it was from him. Zaria didn't respond. She set her bag down, washed her hands, and checked on Ilian first. He was asleep, 2 fingers curled around the edge of his stuffed elephant, his breathing steady. Then she opened the box. Inside, a slim wooden frame wrapped in tissue paper. Beneath it, a folded envelope with no name, just her initial in neat handwriting. She unfolded the letter. He took his first unassisted step on Tuesday. "You missed it. I know what that feels like now. So here's something I won't ever post, won't ever share. A moment that belongs only to you. Cassian." She unwrapped the tissue. The photo was soft, natural light. Zaria seated on the living room floor in her scrubs, Ilian standing upright with both hands on her knees, face full of concentration, her mouth mid-laugh. It was taken through the window. No flash, no disruption, just a stolen second, framed for her, not the world. She stared at the image for a long time. It didn't feel like a bribe, or a manipulation. It felt like a man learning how to be invisible for the sake of intimacy, and somehow, that made her chest tighten. She placed the frame on the mantel beside the board books and pacifier jars. Her mother didn't ask questions. She didn't have to. She simply said, "He's trying, you know." Zaria nodded once. Trying wasn't enough, but it was more than most. The next Thursday, Cassian arrived early. He knocked this time. Zaria opened the door and raised a brow. "You're 15 minutes ahead of schedule. I brought lunch." She glanced at the brown bag in his hand. "From where?" He held it up. "That Vietnamese place you used to like. I remembered the order." She stepped aside. "I only eat half the noodles now. I'll eat the other half." They sat at the table, Elian asleep in his carrier nearby. The room felt normal. Quiet chewing, a clink of a fork, the faint hum of city traffic outside. Halfway through the meal, Zaria asked, "Do you still talk to her?" "Dahlia?" She nodded. He shook his head. "I ended it the day Ilian was born. I didn't explain. I didn't offer a story. I just said I chose wrong." Zaria stared at him. "And if I hadn't given birth early, I would have still chosen wrong. I just wouldn't have known how deep the cost was." She folded her napkin. "So you regret her?" "I regret who I was with her." Zaria leaned back in her chair. "And who are you now?" He hesitated. "Trying. That's not a title. It's all I've got." She looked at him for a long time. No softness in her eyes. No anger either. "I don't know who you are anymore, Cassian, but I know who you were when you disappeared." He nodded. "And I hate that version of me." She picked up her cup. "Good, so do I," but she didn't tell him to leave. Later that evening, while Elian was babbling on the carpet and chewing on a plastic giraffe, Cassian knelt beside him and said something low. Zaria was folding laundry on the couch. She heard Elian giggle. Cassian looked up. "She laughs like you." "She doesn't laugh for everyone," Zaria replied without glancing up. He nodded, and didn't try to earn more than that moment. When it was time to leave, he kissed Elian's forehead gently and stood. Zaria walked him to the door. Before he stepped into the hallway, he turned. "Do you need anything?" She shook her head. You sure? I need you to keep showing up like this. Every Thursday? No, I mean, without excuses, without the ego, without the show. He nodded. Done. She paused. And if you ever leave again, don't come back. His face didn't flinch. I hear you. And for once, she believed he did. It was the first Thursday Zaria didn't hover. She had a shift at the hospital, a 12-hour stretch covering for another nurse. And her mother had a doctor's appointment that couldn't be rescheduled. Cassian was already at the door when Zaria stepped out, Elian in her arms, dressed in a navy onesie and matching hat. She paused at the bottom of the stairs. You'll have him the whole day, she said. Diapers, bottles, stroller, naps, all on you. Cassian reached out without hesitation. I know. She studied him. White t-shirt, comfortable jeans, a light jacket slung over his shoulder, no chauffeur, no assistant, no driver waiting in the SUV. You sure you're ready for this? No, she raised an eyebrow. But I've failed bigger things, he added. This is one I want to get right. She handed Elian over carefully. The baby reached for her hair one last time, then nestled into his father's chest without protest. She adjusted the bag on her shoulder. Elian doesn't like loud noises. He needs his nap by 1 p.m., and he hates the sound of plastic bags. I remember. I'm serious. So am I. She hesitated, then exhaled and stepped past him. Don't text unless it's urgent. I want you to figure it out. He nodded. Zaria didn't look back. By 11 a.m., Cassian was exhausted. Elian was light in weight but heavy in demand. He'd had 2 bottles, 1 poop, 1 outfit change, a 45-minute stretch of crawling over everything in sight, and exactly 4 tantrums, one of which happened simply because the sun moved and changed the window light. Cassian carried him around the apartment, bouncing softly, narrating things like, "This is a spoon. This is a lamp. That is a regret. No, sorry, that's a table." Elian drooled on his shoulder. Cassian laughed. By 12:30, the baby began rubbing his eyes. The signal. Nap time. Cassian turned off the lights, drew the curtains, and rocked him in silence. No lullaby, no fancy tricks, just slow circles and a heartbeat. 20 minutes later, Elian was asleep in the crib. Cassian stared at him for a long time. Small, pure, unbothered, and he whispered, "You deserved better from the start." When Zaria returned home just after 7:30 p.m., the apartment was clean. No clutter, no bottles in the sink. A stack of folded blankets sat on the armrest. Elian was asleep in the crib, calm as ever, and Cassian was passed out on the floor beside the baby monitor. Shoes still on, his hand resting beside a half-read picture book. Zaria didn't wake him immediately. She stood in the doorway and watched. He looked younger like that, human. His usually sharp face softened by sleep, jaw slack, hair messy. She walked to the kitchen and saw a list written on the whiteboard she used for groceries. 3 poops, 2 full bottles, 1 minor tantrum, 0 emergencies. We did okay. Next to it, a smiley face that was lopsided and ridiculous. She chuckled under her breath. He'd earned that nap. When he finally stirred, he blinked hard and sat up quickly. "You're back. You survived." "Barely." She poured him a glass of water and handed it over. He drank like a man who had crossed a desert. "No assistance today?" she asked. "Nope. No driver. I walked. In those shoes." He looked down. "Mistake." She smiled. "You did good," she said quietly. He looked up at her. "Thanks." She gestured to the whiteboard. "The doodle's a little smug. I felt proud. You should." There was a pause. Then she asked, "Did you learn anything?" He stood, wincing from the floor. That diapers come in confusing sizes, that Elian likes the sound of a wooden spoon tapping a mug, that naps are sacred. She crossed her arms. "And that I don't know how you've done this alone." Zaria didn't answer, but she didn't need to, because sometimes silence was the only thing left to say when the truth finally landed in someone else's chest. As he slipped his jacket back on, Cassian paused at the door. Can I ask something? She looked up. Not about us, he added quickly. About him. Okay. Would you let me have him next Thursday again? Zaria studied his face. He wasn't begging. He wasn't pushing. He was asking like a man who didn't deserve a yes, but would still show up even if she said no. I'll think about it. He nodded. That was enough. He stepped into the hallway, but before he closed the door, he said, "Thank you for trusting me today." She looked him straight in the eye. "I didn't trust you. I trusted Elian." Then she closed the door softly. The headline hit like a slap. Inside the scandal, Billionaire's baby mama breaks her silence. But Zaria hadn't said a word. She was in the NICU, charting oxygen levels for a newborn, when her colleague burst into the break room with a phone in hand. "Have you seen this?" Zaria didn't look. She didn't need to. She'd learned months ago that silence is dangerous to people who build narratives for profit. They fill in the gaps with whatever suits them best. The article didn't quote her. It quoted sources close to the family. People who claimed Zaria had trapped Cassian, that she'd weaponized the pregnancy and was now playing the victim for sympathy and quiet settlements. She read the piece that night on her phone, while Elian slept against her chest. They'd blurred the baby's face, but her own was cropped from a charity gala years ago, the last one she ever attended. The article painted Cassian as a misunderstood empire builder, too busy to be perfect, stressed by shareholder expectations, cornered into a relationship with someone who never fit his world. Zaria closed the article and tossed the phone across the couch. Elian stirred. She whispered, "You don't have to fit into anyone's world, little one. You'll build your own." The next day, the speculation exploded. Paparazzi reappeared outside her building. Neighbors stared longer. Even her CO workers, supportive as they were, started watching her like she was a fragile vase on a tilting shelf. Cassian texted her before sunrise. "I didn't authorize this. I had no idea. I'm handling it." Zaria didn't respond. She didn't need promises. She needed action. Later that morning, Cassian stood in a boardroom at the top floor of one of his real estate developments. Polished, pressed, but boiling underneath. The publicist was mid-presentation, flashing metrics and spin strategies on a wall-sized screen. "And if we lean into the narrative that you were blindsided by fatherhood, we can regain the sympathy base," she explained. "Frame it as redemption." Cassian stared at her. "You want me to let the media portray the mother of my child as a manipulator so I can sell luxury condos?" The woman blinked. "Cassian, I'm just telling you what works." "No, you're telling me what sells." He stood, closed the laptop, disconnected the projector. "We're not doing it. But the investors, they'll adapt or they'll walk. You've got millions in this." "I have a son now." He left the meeting and called a friend at a national news outlet. 2 days later, a video was posted to his official channel. Simple background, no logo, no PR branding, just Cassian in a navy shirt, no tie, no filter. "My name is Cassian Leclerc," he said into the camera, voice calm, "and I want to set the record straight." He paused. "Zaria Lennox is the mother of my child. She did not chase my money. She did not chase my name. She met me when I was just a man visiting a NICU, trying to remember my brother." His jaw clenched. "She didn't ask for my wealth. She asked for my time. And I failed her." Another pause. "But she gave me the most perfect thing I'll ever be responsible for. A son. And if you know anything about love, about dignity, about quiet strength, you'll know she doesn't need your sympathy. She doesn't even need your defense." He looked into the lens like he was speaking directly to someone in particular. "She deserves your respect. And she'll always have mine." Then he ended the video. No comments, no hashtags, just the truth. Zaria didn't respond to it publicly, but she watched the clip that night alone, on her couch, with Elian asleep on her chest again. She didn't cry, but she blinked hard when he said she met me when I was just a man. Because it was true. She hadn't fallen for the headlines. She'd fallen for the silence between them. And now, months later, he was finally learning how to speak without pretending. The next morning, there were flowers on her doorstep. Not roses, sunflowers, wrapped in brown paper with no note. Just a small slip of paper folded between the stems. No cameras, no apology tour. Just thank you. It was a Saturday afternoon in early spring when Zaria saw it. She had taken Elian to the park for fresh air. Her mother was walking beside her, chatting softly about grocery lists, and the latest neighbor who kept forgetting to return Tupperware. Elian, now teetering on solid baby steps, clung to Zaria's finger with one hand and a half-eaten teether with the other. They walked past the playground, toward the pond, where ducks splashed and toddlers squealed and couples held hands like the city had stopped spinning for just a moment. That's when she saw him, Cassian, not in a suit, not in a car. Just sitting on a park bench in jeans and a sweater, a stroller beside him, a toddler in his lap, not Elian. Someone else's child, a friend's perhaps, resting against his chest, fast asleep. Cassian looked calm, still, as if the chaos of his world paused for this borrowed moment. Zaria stopped. Her mother followed her gaze, then gave a quiet nod. He looks different. He's softer. He's slower. That's a good sign. Zaria didn't approach. She didn't need to, because she saw what she needed to see. He hadn't noticed her. He wasn't performing. He was just being with a child, in public, no cameras, no staff, just a man who didn't flinch when a toddler drooled on his shirt. That evening, Cassian called. He never called on Saturdays. She hesitated, then answered. "I saw you at the park," she said before he could speak. He exhaled. "Wasn't planned." "I know. That was my godson. I figured." Silence. Then he asked, "What did you think?" She took a second. "You didn't look rich. I wasn't trying to." "Good." He was quiet for a moment, then asked something heavier. "Do you think he'll remember me if I keep showing up?" Zaria didn't respond right away. She looked at Elian, now asleep in the crib, a pacifier falling from his mouth. Then she said, "If you're consistent, he won't forget." Cassian's voice cracked. "That's what I want." Have you ever had someone show you they changed, not with words, but with stillness? If you've ever believed in redemption through presence, not performance, comment below. Sometimes the loudest apology is quiet consistency. The next Thursday, Zaria handed Cassian Elian's diaper bag and a small bottle of sunscreen. "Forecast says 75, she said. Cassian grinned. "I already packed a hat. Elian won't wear it. I brought a backup." She handed him a second bottle. "He only drinks this warm now. Not hot." "Got it." She looked at both of them, matching smiles on father and son. Cassian waited a beat, then added, "We were going to walk to the museum courtyard. There's a new light exhibit. You don't need to tell me." "I want to." She studied him. He wasn't asking for approval. He was sharing a piece of the day, not to earn points, but to build rhythm. "Be back by 6, she said. "Sharp. Don't feed him popcorn again." "I won't. Even if he gives you the sad eyes." "That's cheating," he said, smiling. She shut the door gently, and for the first time since Elian's birth, she didn't watch from the window as they walked away. She didn't need to, because some things weren't performances anymore. They were becoming patterns. The fever started just after midnight. Zaria was changing Elian's pajamas when she noticed his body felt hotter than usual. At first she thought it was the warmth from the room, or the new fleece onesie she'd just unwrapped from the laundry. But then he whimpered, low, weak, not like him. She touched his forehead again. Too warm. She didn't panic. Zaria had seen worse at work. She'd watched infants fight for air, lungs still learning. She'd held tiny bodies as alarms blared and monitors screamed. But this was her child, and that made everything different. She took his temperature, 101.8. She gave him a lukewarm sponge bath, administered the right dose of infant acetaminophen, checked his breathing every 5 minutes. But the fever climbed, 102.7. She texted her mother, "He's okay for now. I've got it. We'll update." She paced, held him, sang quietly. At 3:07 a.m., she called the pediatric hotline. They advised her to come in if it hit 103. At 3:31 a.m., it did. She dressed Elian in soft cotton, double-checked her bag, then opened her contacts. She didn't think. She didn't pause. She called Cassian. He answered on the second ring. Zaria? Elian's fever broke 103. We're heading to the ER now. I'm coming. She didn't argue. Didn't tell him she could handle it. She knew he'd be there. Because for the first time, she needed him. Not for his name, not for his net worth, but because her son deserved to see that his father could show up when it mattered most. The ER was quiet. Zaria rocked Elian gently in the pediatric waiting area, eyes scanning. The triage board, calculating risks, mentally reviewing symptoms. Cassian arrived within 20 minutes. No driver, no coat, just him, breathless, keys in hand, shirt halfway tucked. Zaria stood. He walked up and stopped short. She was holding Elian close, the boy's skin flushed, cheeks too pink. Let me see him, Cassian said softly. Zaria handed him over. Cassian took him like he was carrying a crown. Elian blinked up at his father, then gave a tiny, exhausted sigh. I've never seen him this quiet, Cassian murmured. Zaria nodded. Neither have I. They waited 2 hours. Tests were run. Vitals checked. 4 administered. Zaria never sat. Cassian stayed close. He held her coffee while she talked to the nurses. He rubbed Elian's feet to help with circulation. He didn't pull out his phone, didn't ask for updates every 5 minutes. He just followed her lead. And when she finally sat, legs cramping, he stood behind her and placed his hands gently on her shoulders. Steady, warm, familiar. She didn't shrug them off. Not this time. By 6 a.m., Elian's fever dropped. The diagnosis, a virus. No bacterial threat, just time, rest, hydration. Zaria slumped in relief. Cassian sat beside her, head tilted back against the wall, exhaustion in his face. He's okay, she whispered. He nodded. They looked at each other, and for the first time in months, Zaria saw no pretense in his eyes. No regret performance, just concern and presence. When they were finally discharged and back in the apartment, Zaria laid Elian in his crib and turned down the light. Cassian stood near the window. He didn't offer to leave. She didn't ask him to. They moved in silence, tidying, unpacking, cleaning without talking. Eventually she walked into the kitchen and poured water into a glass. She handed it to him. You did good tonight. He accepted it. So did you. She leaned against the counter. Parenthood's real when it's 4 a.m. and there's no one to perform for. He smiled faintly. That's when you figure out who you really are. Zaria met his gaze. So who are you now, Cassian? He didn't answer right away. Then finally, a man who wishes he learned all this before losing what mattered most. Zaria didn't flinch, but she didn't walk away either. 3 days after the ER visit, Elian was back to his usual self, babbling nonsense at the TV, trying to eat his stuffed elephant, and crawling under the dining table just to test boundaries. His fever was gone, but something else lingered. Zaria noticed it first when Cassian showed up for his Thursday visit. Elian didn't just reach for him. He leaned into him, head on shoulder. Quiet trust. Cassian froze mid-lift, caught in the small miracle of that soft surrender. He's never done that, he whispered. Zaria didn't comment, but she saw it too. That night, after Elian's bedtime, Cassian stayed longer than usual. He cleaned the bottles, then stacked the blocks in a perfect line on the carpet. Elian's new favorite game. Zaria sat at the table checking her hospital schedule. Cassian walked over and placed something beside her elbow. It was a thin envelope, handwritten. No stamp. What is this? She asked, wary. Something for you, he said. Not for Elian, not for appearances, just for you. She opened it slowly. Inside was a reservation slip. No logo, just a time, date and address. What is this? It's not a restaurant. he said. It's a house. A small one. In Ridgefield. Quiet street. 2 bedrooms, garden in the back, close to your hospital. 1 mile from a daycare I already vetted. The keys are yours if you want them. She stared at the paper. I'm not taking your charity. It's not charity. It's an apology that comes with a foundation. She didn't speak. So he added, no ownership ties, no strings. You can put it in your name. I'll cover the deed transfer. All of it. Zaria's hands trembled slightly as she set the envelope down. You think you can fix this with a house? No, he said. But I know you've never asked me for anything. And I also know you've carried everything. Elian, your job, your peace, on a 1-bedroom income. He stepped back, gave her space. You deserve more ease. And if you won't let me give you my heart back, at least let me give you breathing room. Zaria swallowed hard. Why now? He shrugged. Because I thought fixing it meant changing the past. But it doesn't. It means making the present softer. She looked down at the paper, then back at him. You really vetted the daycare. He smiled, just barely. Twice. She shook her head. You're unbelievable. I'm trying to be believable. The next afternoon, she visited the house. She didn't tell him. She didn't take Elian. She just drove herself, parked, and walked up the short driveway to a white cottage-style home with a low fence and a yellow door. Inside, warm light, hardwood floors, nothing staged. No luxury touches. No show-off renovations. Just space. Safe. Modest. Peaceful. She stepped into the smaller bedroom. The sun spilled across the carpet. A small chair sat in the corner, as if waiting for her to read bedtime stories. She walked into the kitchen, found a note on the fridge. You don't owe me anything, but if this gives you even 1 hour of rest, then it's yours. See. She stood in that kitchen, holding that note, for a long, long time. That evening, she sent a message. Just 1 line. We'll move in next month. There was no emoji, no soft punctuation. But Cassian stared at it for 10 minutes like it was the answer to a prayer he hadn't dared speak aloud. He didn't reply immediately. He just whispered to himself, thank you. Not because she'd forgiven him, not because they were back together, but because she was letting him contribute, not with noise, but with structure, and that, for a man like him, meant everything. Zaria hadn't planned to run into Dahlia. It was a Sunday. She had Elian in a carrier strapped against her chest, and they were both covered in crumbs. From a scone she'd half finished before he'd decided to sneeze directly into her coffee. She walked into the grocery store for oat milk and diapers, and there she was, Dahlia Venn, tall, perfect posture, cream-colored coat, a cart with nothing but sparkling water, berries, and 2 protein bars. She turned down the same aisle and stopped mid-step. Her lips curled into a polite smirk. Well, she said, if it isn't the face of forgiveness. Zaria didn't blink. Dahlia, you look comfortable, Dahlia added, eyes scanning the wrinkled shirt and the baby drool on her sleeve. Zaria adjusted Elian's carrier. He stirred but stayed asleep. I'm not here to impress you. Oh, I know. Dahlia tilted her head. You never tried. That was your whole charm, wasn't it? Zaria exhaled slowly. You don't need to do this. Do what? Perform. Dahlia let out a soft, dry laugh. I don't need to perform. I won. Zaria narrowed her eyes. Did you? A pause. Dahlia's jaw tightened. He lived with me, you know, for a month, after the baby. Said he needed space. Said he needed to think. Zaria didn't flinch. I know. He cried for you. Not once. But I heard him talk in his sleep. Your name, not mine. Zaria didn't respond. She didn't need to. That silence said more than anything she could have thrown back. Dahlia stepped closer. You'll never get the man he was before all this. You'll get the broken one. The one with shame in his spine. Zaria nodded slowly. Good, she said. I want the one who learned. Then she turned and walked away. When she got home, she didn't say anything to Cassian. Not that day, not the next. But something must have lingered in her posture, because he noticed. You okay? He asked, as he picked up Elian from the playmat. I saw her. He didn't have to ask who. Zarya poured water into her glass. She's still loud. She's still hurt. She's still trying to win a game that's over. Cassian exhaled. Do you want me to say something to her? No, Zarya said. I want you to stay here. With him. With us. That's louder than anything else. He nodded. Then added, if she ever crosses the line, I'll handle it. Zarya gave a small smile. I already did. Later that week, Zarya received a letter at the hospital. No return address. Just one line written inside. You don't deserve this storybook ending. There was no signature. She didn't need one. She walked into her supervisor's office and requested security camera access for the mailroom. Then she called Cassian. He arrived 20 minutes later. She handed him the envelope. He read it once, then again. Then he looked at her and asked, do you want me to handle it quietly or legally? Legally, she said. We have a child. I won't play in the dark. He nodded once. And by the next morning, his legal team had already contacted the authorities, filed a report, and attached footage that clearly identified the sender. Zarya didn't show up for the confrontation. She didn't need to. Because silence doesn't mean weakness. It means control. And Cassian finally understood how to protect her without standing in front of her. He stood beside her instead. The letter incident faded quickly. Dahlia didn't fight it. Her name never appeared in any report. Cassian's legal team had made it clear that next time it wouldn't be quiet. Zarya didn't want an apology. She didn't need one. But it reminded her that peace was a choice, one she had to remake every day. That weekend, she took Elian to the Ridgefield house for their first overnight stay. The space breathed differently. Sunlight pooled across the floor like it belonged there. The kitchen smelled like cinnamon and laundry. Elian crawled across the new rug without hesitation, as if he already knew it was his. Cassian was waiting outside when she arrived. He didn't ask to come in. But when she opened the door wider, he stepped over the threshold, slow, careful, aware. She handed him a box to unpack. No instructions. He unpacked books and folded onesies, humming softly, while Elian babbled in the background. By sundown, the nursery was arranged, the crib built, the diapers stocked. It wasn't a picture-perfect setup. There were no matching baskets, no curated Instagram lighting, but it was real, and that mattered more. Later, after Elian had fallen asleep, they sat on the floor of the living room with cups of tea and 2 pillows propped behind them. Zarya spoke first. I didn't think we'd get here. Cassian looked over. Neither did I. I didn't think you had the patience for silence. I didn't either. They both smiled, faintly. Then she said it. Finally. I hated you for months. He nodded. I wanted to erase you from everything. The pregnancy, the name, the birth certificate. I wouldn't have fought you. That's what scared me, she said, voice low. You would have let me. You would have let go if it made you look less guilty. He swallowed hard. You're right. Zarya stared at the wall across from her. I didn't stop loving you, she admitted. But I buried it, deep, so it wouldn't interrupt my survival. Cassian looked down. I deserved that. She shifted slightly. Her voice stayed soft, but steady. I needed you to see what absence does. I needed you to feel it. He nodded once. I felt it every time I walked into the NICU and saw that space next to the bed, the space I left empty. She glanced at him. I still don't know if I can trust you completely. I'm not asking you to, he replied. Just trust me with the next minute. Then the next. Zarya tilted her head. That's a long road. I packed light. She laughed quietly. You've changed. He looked over at her. You're the only person I ever wanted to change for. A silence settled. Not heavy, but full. Zarya took a breath. You may never be the man I needed you to be back then. Cassian nodded. But I can be the man you need now. She looked down at her mug, then set it aside. Her voice was barely above a whisper. I still love you. Cassian didn't flinch, but he didn't rush toward her either. He just said, I'll earn that love. Every day. She looked at him. Start with tomorrow. Cassian stood at the window of his office, 24 floors above the noise of the city. Below, traffic crawled, horns hummed, and Manhattan did what it always did. Moved fast and expected everyone else to keep up. But he wasn't moving. He was still, for once. On the table behind him sat a leather-bound folder stamped with the gold seal of Merle and Crest, one of the largest European venture firms in the world. Inside, an offer, full merger, high stakes, multinational expansion, and a seat at the global board that would triple his visibility and move him to London for at least a year. The payout? Astronomical. The cost? Everything he'd rebuilt in the last 9 months. His team buzzed around him like bees on deadline. His assistant, Noel, read updates aloud. Investors are pushing for a response by Friday. The vote is split, but the board will follow your lead. Cassian didn't answer. Noel paused. You want me to stall? Cassian turned away from the glass. No. Let them wait. He walked out of the meeting without a tie, without a speech, without a yes. He drove straight to Ridgefield. Zaria was folding towels on the porch when he pulled up. Elian was crawling through the grass with a plastic bucket on his head, laughing at his own echo. Cassian stepped out of the car slowly. She looked up. You're early. He walked toward her. No briefcase, no posture. I need to talk to you. She didn't stop folding. Is it about Elian? No, it's about us. Now she looked at him. He explained everything. The merger, the board seat, the international move. She didn't flinch. She didn't gasp. She just waited for the most important part. I haven't accepted, he said, because I'd have to leave for a year. At least. She nodded. And I finally have something I don't want to walk away from. Zaria sat down in the chair behind her, towel still in hand. What are you asking? I'm not asking anything, he said. I'm choosing. He stepped closer. I built my name. I chased the power. I got the money. But none of that held me when I was broken. She looked down at the towel, then set it aside. What do you want, Cassian? He didn't rush the answer. I want Thursdays. I want Elian's sick days. I want to carry groceries and put together toy kitchens and be the man who comes through the door, not sends flowers from another continent. Zaria studied his face. You're turning it down? I already did. Silence. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a smaller envelope. I had a contract drafted with my current partners. New terms, local focus, same power, smaller circle. He placed the envelope on the table. I didn't lose ambition, he said. I just finally figured out what I wanted to serve. Zaria blinked slowly. She wasn't surprised. Not really. Because the man in front of her wasn't the one who left her alone in labor. This was someone else, someone who knew what absence had cost him, and someone who was finally building legacy, not empire. Later that evening, after Elian had fallen asleep, she walked into the living room where Cassian was packing up some toys. She stood quietly for a moment, watching him sort puzzle pieces and missing caps. He noticed her and stood. She didn't say anything at first. Then she whispered, "Thank you." He took a breath. "You don't have to thank me." "I know," she said. "That's why it matters." They stood in silence again. Not heavy, not tense, just full. The question lived in his chest for months. It waited quietly, tucked beneath each bottle he warmed, each stroller walk, each bedtime he was trusted to stay for. It never rushed, it never pushed. But it was always there. Now, it sat in his jacket pocket, not in the form of a diamond, not even in velvet. Just a note, folded, worn, written the night Elian was born, the same night Zaria had told the nurse to remove him from her visitor list. He had written it while staring at the NICU monitor, watching his son sleep. A promise he hadn't spoken aloud since, but he still carried it, just in case. Zaria was on the couch reading when he came in from the porch. Elian had gone down early, unusually cooperative after a long day chasing butterflies in the yard. She looked up. "You forgot your phone outside." "I know." She raised an eyebrow. "I didn't want to hear anything but you." he said simply. Zarya bookmarked her page. What's on your mind? Cassian stood near the doorway, unsure if he should cross the room. Then he did. He sat beside her, carefully, not close enough to crowd, but not far enough to suggest distance. I know we're not what we were, he started, and I know I can't erase the parts I got wrong. She watched him, quiet, but every Thursday, every story time, every fever, every tantrum, I've been building something with you, something real. Zarya said nothing, and I don't want to keep building separately anymore. He reached into his jacket, pulled out the note, unfolded it, handed it to her. She opened it slowly. It wasn't a proposal letter. It was simple. I'll never be the man you deserved at the start, but I will spend the rest of my life being the man you can trust by the end, not with grand gestures, but with presence. And, if presence earns me a second chance, I'll take your yes one ordinary morning over 1,000 applause-filled nights. Zarya read it twice, then held it in her lap, fingers resting on the edges. Finally she looked up. Why didn't you ask me this months ago? Because months ago, he said, you were surviving, and I hadn't earned a question like that. Her voice was quiet. And now? He shrugged. Now, I still might not have earned it, but I know what I'm asking. Zarya leaned back. What would it look like? Whatever you want, he replied. Not a wedding, not a headline, not even rings, just a choice, made every day, loud when it needs to be, quiet when it counts. She looked at him, long and hard, and smiled. Not big, not dramatic, just real. I don't have an answer tonight, she said. I'm not asking for one. She handed the note back. He shook his head. It's yours now. Later, after he left, Zarya placed the note inside her nightstand drawer, next to Elian's hospital bracelet, and a folded napkin with a formula dosage scrawled on it from her first solo night home. All three symbols of moments that nearly broke her, but also of what she survived, and now, maybe, what she could rebuild. The morning was quiet, not in a storybook kind of way, just quiet, like any other Tuesday in late spring. The window was cracked open, letting in the sound of distant birds and the faint rustle of leaves. The sky was pale blue, and the air smelled like rain that never came. Zarya was standing in the kitchen in her robe, making pancakes. Elian was in his high chair, chewing on a soft banana slice, his hair still tousled from sleep. Cassian stood at the sink, sleeves rolled up, rinsing a bottle without being told. No one spoke for a moment. It was the kind of morning that wouldn't make it into anyone's biography. There were no photographers, no meetings, no diamonds, no drama. But for Zarya, it felt like everything. She glanced at him. He'd arrived at 6:48 a.m., knocked once, then let himself in with the key she'd given him the week before. A quiet gesture that came without ceremony. She hadn't asked him to stay the night, but she hadn't asked him to leave either. That was the thing about healing. It didn't always come with declarations. Sometimes it came with showing up early. Sometimes it came with remembering how she liked her coffee. I forgot to get more maple syrup, Zarya said, checking the fridge. I'll grab some on my way out, Cassian replied. Thanks. Elian giggled, banana squished in both hands now. Zarya turned to wipe his fingers, and without a word, Cassian was already reaching for a napkin. They cleaned him up together. It wasn't perfect choreography, but it wasn't tense either. It was natural, earned. Later, they sat across from each other at the small round table by the window. Cassian sipped coffee. Zarya read a text from her sister. Elian babbled to himself, tapping a spoon on his tray like it was a drum. You're staying longer today? She asked, without looking up. If that's all right with you. She nodded. You could pick him up from daycare, she said casually. If your schedule's clear, I'd like that. He didn't push, didn't reach for her hand, didn't bring up the letter in her drawer. Zarya noticed and appreciated it. The last thing she needed was pressure disguised as effort. At 9:13 a.m., Cassian left to run errands. Zarya stayed home with Elian. No heavy conversations, no dramatic scenes, But before he stepped out, she handed him a note, folded neatly, slipped into his jacket pocket. He didn't open it until he was sitting in the car, parked in her driveway. Inside, in her handwriting, were 6 words. I still read it every night. No signature, no over-explanation. But for Cassian, it was more than enough. The late afternoon sun slanted through the trees as Zaria stood outside Ilian's daycare center. A light breeze lifted her hair as she watched her son toddle toward her, arms outstretched, eyes full of trust. Cassian stood just a few feet behind him, holding a small juice box in one hand and a folded drawing in the other. "He made this for you," he said, handing over the paper with a proud half-smile. Zaria opened it. Crayon lines formed a lopsided figure, 2 stick adults, 1 tiny stick child, all holding hands beneath a sun that took up half the sky. "He says the tall one is you," Cassian added, voice soft. Zaria ran her fingers along the crayon strokes. "And the shorter one?" Cassian looked down. "I hope that's me." They walked back to her car in silence. No plans, no labels, just the soft sound of sneakers on pavement and Ilian's tiny voice humming something tuneless. When they reached the car, Zaria paused before unlocking the door. "I'm thinking of moving closer to the hospital," she said. Cassian's brow furrowed slightly. "Leaving this place. Eventually. Mom's health is better now, and the commute's long. I found a little townhouse near Cambridge, small backyard, good school district." He nodded slowly. "Do you want help?" "No," she replied gently. "I just wanted you to know. I'm glad you told me." Later that evening, he returned, not to her house, but to his own penthouse, now bare of designer furniture and excess. The walls echoed more than they used to. He didn't fill it with new things. He filled it with moments. Photos of Elian on the fridge, toys in the living room, a calendar with Zaria's shift schedule posted beside it, and every Sunday night he left a small envelope in her mailbox. Not with money, not with letters, but with pages from the scrapbook he was building. Elian's first step, Elian's first fever, Elian's favorite song. He never asked for a response. He never expected a thank you. But one day, he got one. On a rainy Friday afternoon, Zaria arrived at his door. Elian was with her mother. She was holding a book. "The baby journal," she said, handing it to him. "You deserve to see the parts you missed." He held it like something sacred. "Come in," he offered. She did. They sat together on the floor, flipping through pages. Some held joy. Some held grief. But none held resentment. Not anymore. By Elian's 3rd birthday, Cassian was at every appointment, every recital, every meltdown. He showed up with a quiet kind of love, no longer as a man desperate for redemption, but as a father who understood what being present truly meant. Zaria didn't rush back into his arms, but she didn't turn them away either. They rebuilt, not the fantasy the tabloids once demanded, but something stronger, something quieter. And on one warm spring morning, as Elian ran barefoot through the grass of that small Cambridge townhouse, Cassian knelt beside a flowerbed, helping him plant tulips. Zaria stood on the porch, coffee in hand, eyes on the 2 most important men in her life. Cassian glanced up. She smiled. He didn't need anything more than that. If you felt something real while watching this, if you believe that trust is harder to rebuild than it is to break, we'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. What part of this story hit closest to home for you? Do you think Zaria made the right decision by walking away first and watching before letting him back in? Was Cassian's journey enough to earn forgiveness, or was it the quiet showing up that truly changed everything? Leave your answers below. And if you've ever loved, lost, or found healing in unexpected places, this channel is for you. Like, share, subscribe. We'll be back with another story that reminds you sometimes strength whispers instead of shouts. And sometimes love is proven in silence, not promises.